So we made it back to the garage, but let's talk about some of the things that went wrong on Rocky Mountain Race Week and maybe some tips that could help some people out that's doing it for their first time. Stick around. Hey everybody, welcome back to the garage, and it has been the longest week possibly of my life, short of being in basic training in the military. The least amount of sleep I've gotten in a long time, and by far the most time I've spent working on a car in a hotel parking lot or parked on the side of a highway. We'll talk more about that later. But let's talk about kind of some of the issues that we ran into with the smoke monster. And there was one primary issue that was plaguing us from the get-go. And in fact, it was an issue beforehand, but we didn't realize quite how bad it was or what the cause was. Originally, I thought that I had some load issues. Turns out that it was an alternator issue. It was undersized. And what ended up happening, to even make it from Great Bend to Pueblo, we had to run a generator hooked up to a battery charger, roadkill style, to add the additional 10 amps on the, not like the medium setting on the battery charger to even get this thing to go down the highway. Soon as that thing would turn off, the alternator would load up and it would throw another belt. Well, we got to Pueblo and still wasn't running right, but the second pass ripped out through there felt really good on the 60 foot, cut like a 167 60 foot, and I thought it was finally going to make a good pass. Got up to 4,500 RPMs, and you could just see the RPMs fall over. And I'm going to do a video later on looking at the data logs and showing you exactly the data that was coming out of it and where it was losing power. And hopefully I've got a high output alternator on the way, because this isn't something that you can just pick up at your local parts store. Trust me, I bought two on the trip along with another battery to try and satisfy the needs of the car, to no luck. But once that high output alternator shows up, we'll also pull a data log of that and go out and do a rip. That way we can compare the two logs of what it was doing at Rocky Mountain Race Week versus what it should have been doing. All in all, I would guess that the car was down probably at least 200 horsepower because of it being an EFI system. It was causing all kinds of timing issues, and after the third pull at Pueblo, the thing never ran right. Because we just could not keep any voltage in the system. In fact, as soon as this thing would get up and running, even with a 100 amp alternator on there, you could just watch the battery voltage just pull down as it was draining everything off the battery itself. And it's just exacerbated. We're running 3 fuel pumps, 2 electric fans, and an electric water pump. And those 6 items alone right there is going to be probably 60 amps high load at idle. And so we needed something that was putting out at least 100 amps at idle to support those, not to mention the electrical system on the car and then the EFI system. And that was kind of the thing that we were running into from the get-go, and we thought we could work through it and possibly try and at least finish the event. I didn't have any plans on being able to go out there and post some good times. As said, we should have been in the low 10s, possibly even the high 9s on a lucky day. With this setup, but I think the best we ended up running was like a 12.4, and that's just because it was a dog as soon as we had run out of voltage on the system. Another issue that we had was with the valve train and the Brodix stud girdles that came with their own polylocks, and the polylocks kept on deforming. The polylocks were staying locked, but the polylocks themselves would deform and just cause all kinds of valve lash to get bumped into it. And I want to get with Brodix before I go any further into that and see what was going on. It almost looks as if though there was a material issue with these polylocks, to the point where we had a set of Scorpions with new polylocks, Scorpion roller rockers with new polylocks, sitting at the hotel in Denver that we were planning on picking up before we even ran in Denver. So the goal was to get from Pueblo to Denver, go straight to the hotel, pick up those rocker arms and polylocks, get to the track, swap all of that out, which is not a big ordeal, figuring at this point in time we had already relashed the valves 2 or 3 times on the car and even changed a whole third member out on the rear end. We went over from the 3.0 road gears to the 411s, which the 3.0 road gears were absolutely great whenever we were going from Great Bend to Pueblo. In fact, the cool thing about is we got to hang out with Kyle Loftus and Matt over there at 1320 because they passed us on the way to Great Bend, and I said, hey man, we should just kind of hang with these guys for a while. I bet Kyle's got a radar detector on that Audi. And this thing going 80 down the highway had no issues on the 3.0s and ran great. And in fact, it was really nice of them. We pulled over because the catch can or the expansion tank on the radiator came loose of the bracket, so we pulled over to resecure it, make sure it wasn't banging on the power steering pump. Those guys were in front of us. They went down, came back and checked on us, and we sat there and hung out and chatted for a while. So super cool guys that didn't have to do that, but they did take the time to come back and check on us. And actually commented on the fact normally we don't have muscle cars that are keeping up with us on these kind of events. And I said, well, you know, after we do the gear swap, it wouldn't be this way, and it wasn't. 55 was about the max that you were going to get out here. And then we were running into our other issue, which was keeping things cool. This was the hottest Rocky Mountain Race Week on record. It had probably been some of the hottest days on record, period, for that area, where we were seeing temperatures in the high 90s, low 100 degrees, and the cooling systems on multiple cars could just not keep up. And then to toss in 411 rear gears, where to get up to speed so you're getting decent airflow requires more RPMs, and so you're battling both things. So there's going to be some changes on the front end as far as the radiator support and relocating the radiator. I'm going to move it forward some to get more distance between the motor and the radiator to help with airflow, to extract some heat out from under the engine bay. We ended up being all right on the trip to Pueblo, but we were running without a hood. And I ended up sticking the air filter way up in the air, and by doing that, it cut like 70 or 80 degrees ambient temperature going into the motor. And then after relocating the oil cooler for the transmission, you know, we were running maybe 205 peak temps as opposed to 225, which we were hitting beforehand. So that is definitely something that we're going to be looking at for next year. And in fact, I've already ordered a higher flow electric water pump to try and help with that. And as I said, we'll be doing some changes on the radiator mounts. So that is the big things that were killing us. And we got to the point where we were trying to get for Denver. The car was not running right, and we were still just having the alternator issues. And we decided to throw in the towel, because even if we were able to get to Denver, I doubted that we were going to be able to get a pass in by 10 o'clock because we were already running late from having to work on it in the hotel parking lot in Pueblo. And then on top of it, we were going to need to get at least a 160 amp alternator, which is about the highest amperage that you can get off the shelf. And there was no guarantees that that was going to get this car running down the strip properly. We were looking at all kinds of different solutions, and it was going to be throwing money at the car without getting the output that we needed to actually complete this event. And it was heartbreaking. Because as I said, we were running on 4 hours of sleep every night. We were getting up first thing in the morning, working in the cool, doing what we had to do to keep the car running. And it was just kind of one of those things that we hit a breaking point. And I said, listen, man, we've got to call this at some point in time. And it's specifically because of how much money we have into this setup. I don't want to destroy something and end up, you know, having to jerk the motor out and rebuild a block or something like that, because we're having some issues with the valve train that were unexpected. And then I want to figure out the timing issue, because it acted like, for some reason, even though we had verified the timing on Tuesday or Monday, I think, I can't remember, all the days ran together, that the timing was completely skewed off, and it shouldn't have been. We were getting intake backfires, which could have been valve train related issues. I haven't pulled the valve covers off yet. I wouldn't be surprised to see if at least one valve was hung open on the intake side, to the point where I've got two brand new intake valves sitting over here. I'm planning on having to pull the heads off and replace one or two intake valves. Surprisingly, when we did get to Pueblo and pull the valve covers off, we had two valves completely off the push rods. Part of that Brodix polylock issue that we were able to salvage, but the car actually ran fine down a cylinder or two. Not ideal by any means, but it kind of explains some of the issues that we were having, but we don't think that we had those issues at the track. We're pretty sure that all the issues that we had at the track were related to the charge system and the voltage being low. So what's the takeaway on some of this stuff? Well, we didn't get to test this car, and that's kind of the big thing. And everybody says, you know, make sure and test the car. I can't say that enough at this point in time. You need to put some miles on this car, and it's not about testing it at the track. You need to take the car down the highway, take it on a 200 mile trip on the hottest day that you can find and see what the car will do, see what issues rear its head. The most that this car had been driven on the current setup before we left for Rocky Mountain Race Week was 15 miles. The fact that it made it 340 miles to Pueblo is a little bit mind-blowing, given that we were just hanging right on the edge the whole entire time of it not wanting to run. So that's probably the number one takeaway. The other big things that we learned along the way is, we wish that we would have had an electric scooter to zip around and see everybody's cars, things like that. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about doing this. Take an enclosed trailer if you can. A lot of people had stuff stolen in Pueblo. We were lucky, figuring we didn't have an enclosed trailer. So enclosed trailer, even if you have to build the enclosure yourself, just don't make it where people can reach in and grab stuff. That tends to be what happens. Don't be a victim of opportunity where you've made it too easy for somebody to steal stuff. Some of the other things, overbuild some of the things like the cooling system. Look at the things that are going to be the simplest problems to cause you the most issues and target those. And you should be able to figure all those out just by doing your test driving and getting the miles. In hindsight, if we hadn't spent so much time on this, I probably would have taken the GT350 so we could have gone and done the event as first timers. And that's not a bad idea. If it's your first timer, don't take your basically your full-blown race car that can do street duty. Maybe take something that's a little bit more tame, that's going to get you there, get you through the event so you can experience the event, because you're going to learn so much. Within the first day, we had already learned a lot. And we met just the nicest people ever. Everybody that we met were amazing. I haven't checked the standings to see if one of our pit mates, Bob, won the 13-second class, but I know at Pueblo he turned in like a 13.004. After we were joking about him taking a whole 100th off, he went out and did it. And so you just meet the nicest down-to-earth people. Rusty and his son, who was pitted with us, these people were crazy. They drove their 74 Nova from Indianapolis down to Great Bend and then got to Pueblo and had a lower end issue. And unfortunately, I didn't make it to Denver, but they swapped the motor in the pits. They found one, had it brought out, got the cherry picker out, and big shout out to Rusty and his boy. Rusty's a viewer of the channel, and that was his first LS platform or his first factory ECU, and so he had been watching and picking up some tips on how to get things tuned. They made it further than we did. Those guys are hardcore. And you'll see a lot of hardcore guys out there doing stuff like that, and that's what it's all about, is being able to help those people out and being not afraid to ask for help and things like that. So make sure, as I said, you're doing your homework. This is about endurance. It's less about drag racing, and that's the biggest thing I can stress. The other thing is, don't get worked up on all the requirements like we did. I was a little bit disappointed. We went through tech. I've spent thousands of dollars on this car making sure that it would pass NHRA ET spec tech to run into the nines or over 135 miles an hour, and they checked absolutely nothing of that. Honestly, we went and got the cage certified to make sure the cage was certed in case we needed it, which we didn't, so it wasn't a big ordeal. Didn't check cert stickers. Outside of the harness dates, my fire suit, and my helmet, I think the only thing that they actually checked on the car was the expansion tank for the radiator. And I know for a fact that they didn't check the expansion tank on everybody, because there was a famous car that went through tech that didn't even have an expansion tank on it. I'm not sure how they made it through tech, but a little bit skeeved out to see that they didn't check for things like drive shaft loop, flex plate shield, trans shield, some of the basic stuffs that are required whenever you get down into the low 10s or the high 9s and things like that. So maybe there was some assumption made because this car was already set up with a full cage and things like that. I don't know, but I overdid it on the safety aspect. I will never be regretful of that. Those are important things, if not the most important thing, but don't get too worked up about having to do this the first time and pass tech. It's not as hard as you think it's going to be. Talk to some of the guys that have been doing this for years. They will give you some advice, and just make sure your common sense stuff is there for your class or your speeds, and you're going to have no issues there. As far as the road rig tech, headlights, taillights, turn signals, brake lights, horn. That's all you need. And you would be surprised at how many people had issues on day one of even doing that, to the point where we didn't have the trailer there since the co-pilot Corey brought it. We had to do a little bit of wiring, but we anticipated having to do wiring, so I bought the equipment to do that stuff, and we were able to sort that out. And I actually had to smoke check a circuit on there, literally, because of my diagram was not matching up. But if that's something that you want to check beforehand, because I saw a lot of people get pulled out of the pits because they had things wrong on their trailer, where there was a light that wasn't working, turn signal, or a brake light that wasn't working. So those are the things that you want to focus on the most. And then other than that, just have fun. Don't stress out. It is a stressful event. You're not getting much sleep. It's a lot of driving. But oddly enough, we found that the 340-mile drive to Pueblo went quicker in the Nova, even though it took longer. It was more enjoyable than the drive back whenever we were in the Gladiator towing the trailer, which seemed like it took 2 days, And so just so much fun. One of the other things I'm probably going to do for next year is just plan on running the drag pack and bring replacements for the rears. There's always going to be somebody that picks up a nail or something along the way, but you're talking about 250, in this case, 320 cars, which I don't think they'll do again because it was kind of detrimental to everybody trying to run. Day one, we were only able to get 2 runs in, and it was a strain to try and get 3, and they just had too many people, and I understand why they did it, but I think it was a lessons learned event where moving forward, they probably won't do that again. So probably we'll go ahead and pony up the money to get a replacement set of rear full drag pack that we can swap over in case we lose one for some reason, and just take 2 tires with us instead. And that's what we ended up doing, was leaving the fronts on, and we swapped the rears over at one point in time, but I don't even think I'm going to do that next year. As I said, I think I'm just going to run an extra set of the rears with us, and for no more miles than we're doing, the Mickey Thompson drag radials will be perfectly fine, because they're the ET Street R's. So, yeah, air conditioning would have been nice. I don't think that we're going to get air conditioning on this thing. A gear vendors is going to be a must if we keep on the 411 gears on there, so that'll be another mod that we do. I know everybody's talking about the cool shirt that Cletus was running. I think you'll see a lot of those out there next year. It wasn't too bad going down the highway, so I'm not too concerned about that, and I don't necessarily want to add any more electrical load on the system. But I do believe I'll add some rugged radios in here for me and the co-pilot next year, just to make it easier to communicate. We ended up running earplugs the entire way and using a Bluetooth speaker for tunes. And surprisingly, you can hear the speaker better with the earplugs in than you could with the earplugs out. And so we still had tunes going down the highway. Even though we have the complete stereo in here, I had to keep the thing unplugged because obviously it was adding too much to the amp load, things like that. Going down the highway, even though it was 98 degrees outside, it wasn't too bad. So I don't know that we need to go all the way of installing an ice box and a cool suit and stuff like that on there. We're hardcore enough that that's not going to bother us. And then, of course, the biggest mod, if you're running Kirky seats, get some pillows. This makes all the difference in the world going down the highway in a Kirky. Kirkys are comfortable for about 10 miles. Then after that, they start beating on you. So, just small things like that. And that's pretty much it. I'm super excited to get into some of the details, go through the data logs, solve this problem, and get some times. We'll get this thing down to Keystone and make a rip on it whenever it's under full power, see the potential that the car had. Then next year we'll redeem the car and come back and put some good times down and hopefully, as I said, bring home a trophy, which, it has the potential. Seeing the competition out there, there was no reason why this car should not have been able to be in the top 3, if not win the class. And the car, suspension-wise and stuff like that, was great. Whenever we did cut the 160, 60-foot, car left good, had the right amount of travel on the front end, just went down the track, and it was a great feeling for that, 330 feet. It was like, yes, this is what the car should feel like, and then it'll be interesting. So make sure and stick around and watch the videos where we go over the data logs and talk about how this thing wasn't making power. So you guys know the drill. Thanks for stopping by the garage. Remember, ABT, always be tuning.